Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Krashy, and today we're going to be diving into my review of Predecessor Early Access. Now, first and foremost, let me start off by thanking Omega Studios for the invite to this content creator kind of preview. We got to play the game early, we got to release some of this footage and give our thoughts on the game, record whatever kind of content we want, so big shout outs to them. And for this review, again, keep in mind, I only got to play like a 4-day early test, so I'm sure my opinions will slightly change or more for form over time, as I'm going to be putting in lots and lots of hours on Predecessor in the coming future. We're still waiting for December 1st, and I'm very excited about it. But let's go ahead and dive into all of my thoughts on early access, what I like, what I don't like, what I have criticism on. And we are going to start with paid early access. So I've kind of already given my thoughts on this a little bit, but I think that to answer your question, should you buy into early access? Should you get into this game? My answer specifically is absolutely yes. I think at the kind of reduced price, I think it's the bundles are on sale for 1 week or 2 weeks at 50% off. It's just a steal, man. Even the $40 pack being the most expensive, you're going to get 6 skins. You get a bunch of these other little rewards that I kind of forget. You're going to get like $80 worth of currency. Like you're getting so much for these bundles. So even if you're not like in the full send position, like you don't know if you really want to buy the biggest bundle, the $10 bundle is going to come with like $6 currency, comes with a Gideon skin, and ultimately I think that the bundles are absolutely worth it. So if you want, you can absolutely wait for free to play for when the game comes out much later on, but this is really getting into the game early and trying to support the game, and kind of like if you know that you're going to be around for the long haul, I think getting into the game, paying any more than the $10 option is worth it for you. So if not, if you're curious about the game, either wait, stick around, watch some content, make sure you subscribe to this channel for future Predecessor content, drop a like on the video, and yeah, otherwise, yeah, $10 worth it or wait. So that's my thoughts on paid access. Now let's go ahead and talk about the game. So the game felt good. The game feels good. The character designs feel very flushed out and complete. Now, I don't have any Paragon experience, so I can't really speak from the Paragon perspective. I'm coming in from the MOBA perspective, right? I've played tons of MOBAs in my past, and it's like one of my main genres, pretty much my main genre. But speaking about just the gameplay, how it felt very good. The game is actually developed in Unreal Engine 5, so it has a lot of that crisp and like snappiness, I guess. It just feels like a very well completed game, looks amazing, feels amazing. And my biggest thing, and I'm going to compare it to Paragon the Overprime, is it has a lot of responsiveness and feedback on hit. Now, one of my biggest complaints about Paragon the Overprime is it was very hitchy and clunky and kind of laggy, but when you would hit something in the game, I didn't really feel like I felt that impact. I didn't feel the weight behind my action. I didn't really feel like I was playing my character. I felt like I was piloting something, kind of clunky and just like I said, not super well polished. Now in Predecessor, everything felt very clean and crisp. I didn't really like hitch or get clipped into walls. I didn't have like things like not working. I didn't run into any bugs myself personally. Now I'm sure the game will launch with bugs, absolutely. What game doesn't have bugs all the time? But I didn't run into any bugs from what I can see, and I think that the game from a performance standpoint was running very well on both of the computers that I played with. So I played with my more expensive computer and my less expensive computer during this test, and yeah, I just had a good experience with the game in terms of a performance standpoint and in terms of how the game felt to play. Now, what about the game flow, the game loop? I think that it was really good. Most games were at minimum 30 minutes. I think I had one game that ended 27 minutes. And I'm not going to lie, I think during the playtest, one of the players crashed. So we were probably able to like finish the game or get finished a little bit earlier. I don't really remember. But most games are going to be that very standard MOBA feeling, like 30-minute, like long form MOBA. That feels really good. Now there is a like solo off lane, a mid lane for casters, and a duo lane with a jungler. So very traditional MOBA style, very defined meta, which I really like because it doesn't feel too interpretive, and by and large, as far as you're playing like in a solo queue kind of environment, that's probably going to be the meta that gets stuck to. Maybe people will get creative, you never know, for competitive and such, but it's a very standard feeling, and everything about that felt very familiar to me and very comfortable. So coming in from a MOBA background, I definitely felt like I understood what was going on, and where I really need to improve and learn is understanding matchups, like really understanding the balance, the flow of the game, from a strategy standpoint, and then learning the items and such. So let's go ahead and talk about that experience, right? Learning the items and the flow of the game. So I think getting into a MOBA, any kind of MOBA, is going to require some studying, right? Or just playing over time, learning over time. I definitely don't know all the items, but the cool thing, and I really do like this because it provides some complexity while still being, like, it provides some nuance and complexity while still being a rather simple system. If you are a jungler, you get the Hunt Dagger, and the Hunt Dagger is like your smite, your ability to, last hit an objective or a jungle camp, and then that's like the one thing that you get that you have like an activation on. If you're a laner, you're gonna get refillable potions. So it's very like simple, yet there's some nuance there, right? If you're a laner, you get these refillable potions that you get, and if you are a jungler, you get this smite. Now, whenever you start the game, you're met with the ability to pick a crest. Now, the crest system is, again, it's an item building kind of system that feels very simple but has some nuance to it. So you can pick all different kinds of crests. Marksman crests are like for 80 carries. There's like the wizard crest, and I forget the name of the other one. There's like a magician and wizard crest, so that's for the casters. You have like the warrior crest, and so like those are for like bruisers. You have like these tanky crests, supporty crests, and the crest essentially is like a quest. Now, this reminds me a lot of my time in Heroes of the Storm, where you would have a talent that has a quest associated with it, where you essentially have like a condition that you have to complete, some kind of a challenge in front of you, and when that's completed, it will upgrade the item. Now, the crest can actually be upgraded, I believe, twice if I remember correctly, and will essentially like you have to do damage by hitting your enemies, or you have to heal yourself by hitting your enemies, or hitting landing abilities, things like that, small things like that. And once you complete that quest, or once you complete that set of requirements, then when you go back to your base, it will greet you with the option to upgrade your crest into one of 3 items. Now, this is where it's fun. The items are kind of named with what kind of effect that they're going to have and like what it essentially will do, and that's pretty cool. Like, you can read the item and understand what the activation is, and these are activatable items. I don't know 100% because I didn't play every single item if they're all activatable, but I believe that they are. And this is like your first item that you're really going to be like kind of probably completing, or I mean, maybe that's actually not necessarily true. You might be able to get your gold first before completing the crest, but it's going to be one of your first items that you actually have slotted, and you will kind of like start to learn your preference for these items. And again, I still haven't even done that yet, per the character that you're playing. So the crests have some simplicity to it because you essentially get this item and you're going to be just building it over time, but it's also a little bit nuanced in the sense that you have to pick which item you actually want. So I really like this. It's pretty simple. The like activatable item that you get for like being a laner is like a refillable potion, and then you have 2 options for vision. And this is also very simple but gives you a little bit of nuance because you're not just buying wards like you would in other MOBAs. And I believe they had it like that in the past but have changed to this new version where you can essentially buy either vision wards or you can have a sentry. Now, sentries are like sweepers where you can sweep out an area and try to eliminate wards by gaining vision of enemy wards, and wards themselves are just vision wards. So you actually just have a ward that you can drop down, and then they kind of like refresh and give you these this like cooldown back over time. So very simple in the sense that like everybody's gonna have this, and you're not just buying it and having to spend and think about the economy behind it, but a little nuance in the sense that you have to decide which one that you want. So a little bit of simplicity when it comes to building, buying, and getting into the game, and then we start getting into our trees and what you're purchasing. So at the start of the game, I believe you have 350 gold, and that will buy you like 1 component piece, right? I think for some of the items, it's like a dagger. For some of them, it's like a spell book, something like that, where you're going to start off in lane, and then it just turns into traditional MOBA building items. You have like a tree, and you will build multiple components that will build into like a medium tier item that will build into like a full built item. Now, the items themselves that are not the crest item are not activatable. So I don't believe I saw a single one that's activatable. In fact, I'm pretty sure that I have confirmation just looking at Reddit and different sources that say there are no activatables. So the game in that sense is a little simple, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a good thing because I do think that activatable items in MOBAs are pretty cool, but it keeps the game a little bit more simple. So what I like about Predecessor is that it very much so has that traditional MOBA style gameplay, traditional MOBA flow. It's got the MOBA setup with like the off lane, one center, two like duo lane with jungle. It's got the bosses and the game flow that a MOBA has, but I think that it is a little bit simpler. A little bit, not very much. So not even to the sense where, you're comparing League of Legends to Heroes of the Storm. If you have any context there, League of Legends would be a little bit more, much more nuanced and like hardcore MOBA, whereas Heroes of the Storm, very, very simple in a lot of its design tactics. So it's not even that much of a gap, but it's a little bit more simple, and I like that. As for the game flow in terms of gameplay, you have 2 towers in each lane, you have an inhibitor that if destroyed will come back over time, and then you have a couple of bosses. In the early game you have the mini prime, and in throughout the game you have the Fangtooths. Now the Fangtooths are a stacking buff, so the more Fangtooths that your team gets is going to kind of like incrementally increase that buff. So controlling Fangtooth, being postured for Fangtooth, keeping vision around Fangtooth, very, very important, which gives the sense of urgency and brings people together in the game. So this is what's going to force your team fights. This is what's going to force, action from the junglers outside of gank in the early game. And then you have a whole host of other buffs in the game. So red buff being dot damage, and I think it's like a basic attack slow, blue buff mana regen, ability haste, and then extra ability damage to minions and monsters, so you can kind of clear faster. The gold buff in the duo lane is for gold, and then the green buff is, I believe, gold in the EXP. Might have some regens on it as well. And again, as for Fangtooth, you get like increased stats and out of combat movement speed, and then those become stacking, and I believe it stacks up to 6 times. So the more a team is securing Fangtooth, the much stronger that they're going to be getting, and that's where you start getting some of your closeout mechanics. Now the mini prime, I think it gives armor and damage, if I remember correctly, and I think it's just for the hitter. So like if the jungler is able to clear the mini prime, they're going to get a nice little buff that they can use, which I actually think that the mini prime is not necessarily super important. And the big prime, which is this is like the big objective of the game, you're not really getting these too often, is going to give, I'm not even sure what all the benefits are. I know that you get more damage, and I think that you get like the empowered waves, if I remember correctly. Again, still a lot of this that I still have to learn, but this is like your game winning kind of closeout team fight / closeout objective to win the game. The river buffs, I believe they all give mana regen, and the pink one gives ability damage, the green one gives an extra shield, the orange one will give attack speed, and the gray like river buff will give movement speed. Now I don't quite know all the timers of all the buffs or anything like that yet, but when speaking on jungle and camps and things of that nature, they all just feel very normal to MOBAs. There's camps, you fight for them. There's some the mid river buffs are definitely to be contested by the mid laners and or jungle. Fangtooth is going to be where a lot of action around the map happens and where a lot of the game flow is pulling. And then prime, mini prime, that's going to have some action there too. But ultimately, you're going to be really controlling the map by ganking, setting up, like pushes. And there was always like a point of the game. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. There was always a point in the game where one team is like kind of like the definitive winners at that current set point, and the other team is on the back foot, and it hits like this lull where the team that's in the lead has to find a way to kind of continue and pressure to keep their lead, to maintain their lead, whereas the team that's on the back foot can get a little bit of window of opportunity to come back. They can farm a little bit more. Maybe they can get some picks. Maybe they can start pushing, people in the right direction in terms of, split pushing or, starting to group for Fangtooth fights, things of that nature. But it never feels like one team is dominating too hard, unless they are, right? If one person gets super fed, then that game's going to be really rough. But the overall game flow felt nice. It felt fair. It felt pretty good. All right, now let's dive into some of the things about the early access that I didn't really care for. I think overall with Predecessor, the UI just feels a little basic, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just doesn't really feel like it maybe has actualized its full self yet. I definitely think there could be some like design iteration there, but probably my biggest concern when it comes to UI is some of the menus that pop up. For example, the main one being the shop. I think that a lot of the UI in terms of the shop and how big that it feels could just be solved with like some scaling, and so that's not too bad. Like they could definitely add that in the future where you could scale the shop down or make it more of like a window where you could move it around. But I think one thing that definitely felt lacking for me was the ability to cleanly ping the map. There's not really an option to, and apparently this is the way that it works in Smite, to kind of like free your mouse cursor and then be able to move it over to ping the map, or to even bring up a window where the map is a little bit more pingable. Now this is definitely an implementation that I really did like from Paragon the Overprime while playtesting that game, and I definitely hope we see some version of that. The game feels a little bit locked in its kind of third-person perspective where you're definitely turning and looking and pinging and doing things of that nature while also using the communication wheel. And while the communication wheel is great for that because it does actually ping the map, I would still like a kind of manual quick version of just being able to swipe my mouse over, ping it really quickly. So hopefully we see a little bit of iteration there, but I don't think it will be that bad if it doesn't change too much. I'll have to get a little bit more used to using the communication wheel and getting really, really fast with it, or even finding comfortable keybinds for the communications, but I would definitely prefer the ability to just quickly ping the map, as I think it gives a little bit more freedom and control to the player. Now, like I said, for the shop, I think something simple, just like being able to scale it down, or maybe even like a redesign of that UI would be really, really nice. But overall, like I said, when it comes to UI, the game still feels very clean. It just feels a little basic and at times just a little bit too big. Another thing that I have to say about the game, and this is a really weird concern, it's definitely some criticism that I actually heard from some of the other testers at the time, was how quiet the game can feel at times. I don't think that there's enough kind of like immersion style audio in the game. It just feels very, very empty and quiet. Now, I think that comes in the form of lacking voice lines, in lacking kind of like environmental ambiance, you know, birds chirping or the rustling of, like plant life or whatever. And I definitely hope that we see a little bit more audio engineering and audio design for Predecessor going forward, but it doesn't inherently take away from the experience of playing the game. I just felt that lacking immersion being inside the game, where it felt like I was truly in the map playing it. And it's just such a small nitpick, to be completely honest. The last thing that I can really say as far as kind of like an issue I had with the game was I didn't really care for a lot of the skins. It feels like it's a little early on, and that's maybe not part of their focus, as we do know that Omega Studios has said that they're very gameplay focused. So I don't really have anything to say when it comes to the lacking shop, or like the lack of a ranked mode, or a pick ban draft or anything like that, as none of that is really present in the game yet. But I definitely do think that over time those are going to be concerns that we might have if they're not coming in a timely fashion. So my biggest thought process going into the rest of this early access is, one, I hope that Omega Studios continues to keep up good communication, and maybe will continue or push themselves towards creating a roadmap and updating a roadmap and giving us really good communication. One thing that I fear from developers is they never really want to overpromise, but under communicating is kind of equally as bad. And I would much more prefer and love a developer that's a little bit bold and willing to say, hey, look, this is what we're working on, this is the timetable that we're working on, and if and when that changes, they can kind of approach us honestly and say, you know what, this is going to take us a little bit longer. In my opinion, open communication and really explaining to your players what's going on, why things need to change, why something may not have worked out, is always a lot better than just radio silence, where it feels like you don't really know what's going on, and therefore you just feel like a slight layer of confusion or resentment even growing because you don't really understand. So overall, I think that there are very few things about the current early access for Predecessor that I don't really enjoy. And I don't even mean to couple in some of the missing or lacking systems, because we know that's the case. So you definitely have to know that going into the game, that there's not really a ranked mode. I don't know if they have like hidden ELO or MMR. I would assume that they would for the sake of matchmaking. So we'll have to see and kind of give feedback in terms of their iteration on matchmaking. But overall, my thoughts are very simple. The game feels fun. It definitely feels worth getting into or even purchasing into. I think that the gameplay, the core gameplay, what the game is, the foundation of Predecessor, is incredibly solid, and that's why this is my particular choice for the Paragon remakes that I really want to engage with, because given enough time, they can iterate on UI design, they can iterate on audio engineering, they can iterate on their version of a rank system and their matchmaking, their changes, their store, their skins, all the designs that they have. So lots of promise built on a very solid foundation, but still seemingly a bit early on. So keep in mind the game is early access, and that is exactly what I would say it feels like. Still feels very early access, but it feels like a very polished and clean and crisp version of a game that I can very easily see reaching its full potential on release. So friends, thank you so much for watching. Drop a like on this video, subscribe for future Predecessor content here. You can also check out the link in the description to go to my MOBA Krashy channel, where I will most likely be covering Paragon the Overprime, you know, an upload here or there. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to be kind to one another, tell someone you love them, and I'll see you on the next video.